Good morning, South Africa, and welcome to True State of the Nation, where we take an honest look at what is happening in our country. So last week saw the 10th anniversary bash of the EFF, where the champagne Marxists spent millions congratulating themselves for a decade of hateful and divisive politics. Now, the event itself would not even be worth talking about if it didn't serve as a reminder of everything that is wrong with the EFF. This was exemplified by Julius Malema leading his supporters in singing of Kill the Boer. Now, I support free speech, and Julius Malema, like any other South African, should be free to say whatever he wants, even though most of what comes out of his mouth is absolute rubbish. But free speech does not cover the incitement of violence, and calling for his supporters to shoot people is without a doubt an incitement of violence. If it's not, then what is? The court that found otherwise was simply wrong.
The charge will be laid in terms of Malema's violation of at least 3 key UN charters. The first is the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. Article 3 of the Convention makes it a punishable offence to direct and publicly incite people to commit mass murder on the basis of their identity. The second is a declaration on the rights of persons belonging to national or ethnic, religious and linguistic minorities. This declaration compels the South African government to ensure that persons belonging to minority groups may exercise their rights, including, in this case, the right to life and to practice the profession of farming without any discrimination. The third is Article 27 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. The DA recently forced the South African government to live up to its international responsibility to comply with warrants issued by the International Criminal Court. We will now do the same to force it to act against Malema.
The struggle origins of this song should have no bearing in determining whether or not it constitutes an incitement of violence today. But a lot of people have already commented on whether or not Malema should be allowed to sing the song. I'm more interested in why he wants to. Why would the leader of a political party want to sing an apartheid-era liberation song 30 years after apartheid? A song that clearly polarizes people. And the answer is in the question, for the very reason that it does polarize people. The EFF's political strategy is very simple. Present themselves as a liberation movement and appeal to people emotionally instead of rationally. Everything about the EFF is designed to be emotionally triggering, like wearing workers' uniforms in Parliament, and even their name is an emotional trigger. While most political parties express their political ideology in their name, like Democratic Alliance, the EFF's name is a purely emotional con. Economic Freedom Fighters. 3 extremely emotive concepts that say nothing about policy, but capture the imagination of those desperate for economic freedom. So the EFF is not engaged in a political campaign to gain votes, but rather a psychological campaign. This is a very common technique in political propaganda, finding people's emotional trigger points and then pressing them. This is why the EFF is so focused on race, because this is the most emotional topic in South Africa. So keeping not only racism, but the idea of a necessary struggle against racism alive is a political necessity for the EFF. So the point of Malema singing the song is much more to manipulate his own supporters than it is to trigger others. Dictators throughout history have used the same strategy of emotional manipulation. First, you tell people they are not free, they are still oppressed. Then you tell them who is to blame for this oppression. And finally, you claim that only you can liberate them from it. So how does the EFF do this? They claim that white monopoly capital controls the economy, and so black people are still oppressed. And who do they blame for this? Well, white people, of course. The current state of the country is not because of the ANC's terrible policies or corruption. That is instead just a symptom of the magical force of white monopoly capital. And who can liberate you from this terrible oppression of white monopoly capital? Well, only the EFF can liberate you by nationalizing land, banks and mines. It's a very straightforward message, and it's very easy to convince people that it's true. What makes this emotional manipulation even worse is that the EFF's target audience is the disenfranchised, those who have not benefited from the end of apartheid, those who have been failed by 30 years of incompetent ANC rule. For the millions of South Africans who still live in poverty, the promises of the EFF are extremely appealing. It doesn't matter that the EFF's policies would be disastrous for those very people, because the emotional promise of economic freedom is more powerful than the logical conclusions of those promises. The EFF is promising nothing more than an extreme version of failed ANC policies, and so the only logical conclusion would be more extreme failure. But Julius Malema is an excellent emotional manipulator. He mimics the techniques of others like Stalin, Mao Zedong, Hitler and Castro. He can claim the moral high ground while pretending not to notice his own hypocrisy. He can sing a racist song and then call other people racist with a straight face. He can accuse the ANC of corruption without answering his own party's lingering accusations. Like other authoritarian leaders, his power to convince lies not so much in the message, but in how that message is emotionally conveyed, with so much conviction that even he is starting to believe his own lies. But let me know in the comments what you think, and please share this video and let's get South Africa talking.